Welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie Karen Burchill. Today we are going back to the basics. I'm going to give you some pointers. So if you're a beginner or you want a refresher course, this video is for you. Grab a coffee and let's get started. This is an easel that I bought at Dollarama in Canada. It was during Thanksgiving and they've had it for multiple years. So check it out. I've given it a coat of black paint and I'm using this as a display in my kitchen. I've cut some mixed media board to size 7 by 6. That's what fits in here. This mixed media board was a 12 by 12 board that I got at the Crafter's Workshop, and I cut it with my X-Acto knife. And here are some fall ones that I have that I can swap them out as the seasons change. I like the idea of having one display and swapping it out. I'm using this Berry Baubles napkin. This napkin comes from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. There's a link in the description box below. I love the green and the red of this napkin. It matches my Christmas decor, so I am going to use it. Now, this napkin, you have 4 identical patterns in 2 different orientations, swinging to the left, swinging to the right. Now, if you don't have this easel, you can do the exact steps that I'm going to show you on an 8 by 10 canvas board or an art journal page. You might have a little bit more real estate, a little bit more leeway to do things, but the same steps apply regardless of the substrate. So don't worry about that. Here, I'm using a 6 by 6 card, and this fits on here. There's not a whole lot of leftover space, but I could make this into a card. A 5 by 7 card would work as well. Now, with most projects, I like adding some texture. So I grabbed this linked tiles stencil from the Crafter's Workshop and stuff on the side, a little bit of room on the side to put some texture paste or modeling paste through the stencil. So that's my plan. Before I do that, I want to colorize this. I'm tweaking the colors of the background to match my Christmas decor. That teal green, the bright red, and this Naples yellow. These are the colors that I have right now in my decor. And when you're doing mixed media, you can match it to your decor and change as you go. I'm mixing the Naples yellow paint with some white gesso and getting a good coat on there. Preparing the napkin, you want to take off 2 excess plies. All of Ninny's napkins, you have 2 excess plies, so you want to take those off. Don't throw it away. We're going to use it later down the road. Now I grabbed my liner brush and I'm putting a very little bit of water on it and water cutting the excess off. Now, this napkin is white, the background. And so it's going to pretty much disappear, especially on my lighter background with the Naples yellow. But I want to get rid of the excess. So I am cutting it off. And look at this, how beautiful it looks with that yellow background. And again, it's going to match my decor. Now I'm being ultra picky here and cutting out the excess in between these Christmas balls. The reason for that is I like the look better. But if it does make the napkin a little bit more fragile, a little harder to work with. So if you're a beginner, leave this part in to give you a little bit more stability. And then as you improve your skills, you can get a little bit more finicky, like me. So I'm putting that, and I can run it off the page or not. Depends on my personal preference. Now I grab a white Stabilo pencil, and I am just simply marking where my focal image is because I really don't want to put a lot of the texture paste or modeling paste underneath it. So you're not going to be able to tell or see this in the camera, but I do this so to help myself, to give me some guidelines about where the focal image is going to be. So now I grab my modeling paste, and I like using the Crafter's Workshop brand, and I use my palette knife, and I apply it to a key card. And then put a coat on my mixed media board. Put that there. I kind of have a straight line there. I do scrape off some of it so I don't end up with this stark straight line because that just looks a little odd. And then I'm giving this a dry before I apply some of this in another spot on my board. Now, if you were doing this on a larger substrate, an 8 by 10 or a 9 by 12 or 7 by 10 art journal, you'll have a little bit more room to apply more texture and put more detail into the background. Now, if you like the way the white is showing of the modeling paste, you could leave it that way. Now, I'm going to change that. I'm going to go more vintage. So it's the look I want to go for, but you could have left that white modeling paste showing through if you like that look. It's going to look brighter than where I end up, but you can have options. So here I've taken the Naples yellow and applied it over top and colorized the modeling paste. Now I want to add a little bit of detail into the background, so I grabbed one of my script stamps. This one's a bit of a larger font, and I'm applying it with black archival paint or ink, archival, because I want it to be permanent. I don't want to reactivate. And I removed the focal image because I don't want as much underneath the focal image, but I'm not too worried if it is. This is just going to show through ever so lightly once with the finished product, but it's just all these little details. So we've added texture, now we've added some fine patterning, and we have the colors of our focal image. All part of a necessary art journal page or mixed media piece. So now that I'm pretty much done with my background, although there is a few more steps in my quest to turn this more vintage looking, I'm applying a good coat of fluid matte medium. I use the Liquitex brand underneath, and then I'm pressing it down gently. Now, please remember, when the napkin gets wet, it gets very, very fragile. So you need to be gentle. One way to prevent it from ripping, put a lot of matte medium of the or whatever adhesive you're using on the brush, and that lessens the friction and lessens the likelihood that you're going to rip the napkin. I'm putting a coat on top, and then I'm going to make sure that this gets a quick dry. I'm loving the look already, and I'm excited that it's going to match. Now, in here where I cut out, I didn't get as close as I should have. So I could notice where the napkin ended and the background began. So I'm applying a little bit of gesso and colorizing it just to mask it, just tweaking the background here and there. And that's what all I'm doing here. Just taking some of that Naples yellow, deepening the color in some spots. Now that I have the focal image and everything in front of me. So you can adjust as you go. So a combination of gesso, Naples yellow. I'm just working my way around. Now I want to colorize my focal image. I want to brighten it up, especially with it going over the yellow background. It dulled it just a smidge. And I'm using my Inktense blocks. Now, Inktense blocks are a wonderful addition to your mixed media art journaling stash. They are ink and they are permanent once you reactivated them and it is completely dry, which I like. It makes life so much easier. Now, if you don't have Inktense blocks, you can use acrylic paint, and I do use it later to add a little bit to match the color, but I highly recommend these Inktense blocks. They are expensive in the initial outlay, but they last forever. I've had this set for 9 years and there's lots of color and pigment to go. So I'm just using a brush. I'm activating with water, but you can activate with fluid matte medium. You could activate with gesso, although if it's white gesso, it will become a bit more puzzled. And some of this, I'm adding gesso to it, and that's just adding it, making it look more painterly. So it looks like I've actually painted it, not just glued down a napkin. So I'm just using the swatched out area of my Inktense blocks and dropping in color. Now, one of the tricks that I have is I often use one or two colors with or without the gesso when I overpaint. And that works whether I use the Inktense blocks or whether I use acrylic paints. I'm deepening the color here, brightening it up because I want that focal image, A, to be more vintage and B, to be brighter. And now that the background isn't white like the napkin, I want these brighter colors. I'm just dropping in and I'm switching the brush. I have a very small round brush. I like using angle brushes for this. Use whatever size brush works for you. So go as small as you need. I'm just dropping in color and moving around. And when you're over painting, you can do one or two elements of the focal image, or you could do all of them. You determine it. There I have some red paint and I grab my stylus. I picked this up from Dollar Tree. And I'm just dotting all the red berries that are on this. Now, because I'm using the stylus, the paint is dimensional. It's adding texture to my finished project. Now, with the greens there, if you have more forest green in your home decor, you could use forest green. If, like mine, it has a little bit of teal, I put a little bit of teal in there because I want it to match what I have. Now I'm turning my page substrate around so I'm not putting my hand into the wet paint, and I'm going to make sure that that's completely dry before I go on to the next step. Now, on this Christmas ball, it had some yellow leaf patterns. So instead of using the Naples yellow, I wanted to add a little bit of bling. So I grabbed my fine line applicator bottle, and this has gold Liquitex Basics paint in it that I've thinned. And I'm just going over the pattern with that bottle. It's allowing me to get some of this fine in. It's also making it dimensional. So I've got a little bit of dimension on all the elements of my focal image. And I'm really liking the extra addition of bling. Because in my mind, you got to have bling on an art journal page and a mixed media piece. So again, once that's dry, I'm going to add some. So I thought, oh, the tops of the ornaments, I'm going to make them all gold as well. But I could have painted them black if that's what I wanted to go with. I could have changed the color from the artist's decision, that created the napkin. And again, I am drawing in between. Now I'm ready to edge the page, and I've got black acrylic paint on my angle brush, and I am shading around the edge, getting a little bit of the black paint. That's just framing my page, my panel, whatever substrate you have. It just really brings it out, and it's really starting to push it into that more vintage look. But I'm not done yet with making this a little more vintage. I just keep adding more till I get the effect that I'm looking for. Start with a little and build. Once again, it's dry. Now I've got the black paint and now I'm shading the leaves, the ornaments, the bows. And this is going to make it look a little bit more aged, a little more vintage. Because remember, some of the shading that would have been in the napkin, because I overpainted, I may have pushed that back. So I'm re-putting it and putting it back. So I'm just working my way, doing each ornament, the leaves. And again, I am not trained on where the shadows and lights are hitting or anything. I just do what looks good. If it doesn't look good, I grab a baby wipe, wipe it off, and then start over. And because everything's permanent underneath, I can do that without problem. Now here I'm turning it a little more vintage. I have a little brown paint, a little black paint on this Ranger blending foam, and I'm just rubbing it lightly over the area where I applied the modeling paste. This is making that texture stand out and making it more vintage. Now, if you liked it with the white, like remember back at the beginning when I just put the modeling paste on, you could have left it there and it would have a very different feel. That's what I love mixed media. You have options. You can change one or two things and end up with something that looks very different, has a very different feel. Now I've got black paint on the makeup sponge here, so I'm just edging around and painting the edge of my mixed media board. Just framing it a little bit more. And if you're looking at it now with that darkness at it, it has really grunged it up. It's really pushed it into the vintage thing. So here is a stamp. And underneath that stamp is that napkin ply that we removed from the focal image. And I'm stamping on the napkin. So I'm using the excess ply and I'm stamping my sentiment on the napkin. So, and one of the reasons I'm stamping on the napkin and not right onto the substrate is because I got texture on there. I will not get a good stamp. I'm giving this a good dry, and then I'm going to use my liner brush and water, and just like how I water cut the focal image out, I'm going to water cut the sentiment out. So this allows, by stamping it on the napkin, it allows me to get a perfect stamp, because if it didn't stamp well, I can just keep stamping till I get one. And I make several of them because, oh, I might use it for, it goes in my stash and I use it for something else later. Just going around and getting that deckled edge. Now, once I have this, I can try it at different places on my page substrate. It allows me to make that decision by auditioning it in different places. I knew where I wanted this to go, so there was no auditioning it. A good coat of matte medium, press this in, and it's right over top of some of that texture paste. And when I put some on top very gently, the napkin disappears. And all I have is the perfect stamped sentiment. Decided I needed a little bit more bling. This is just gold paint that I've thinned down. I give it a stir because it kind of settles while it sits on my table. And then I'm using a fan brush to splatter it with gold paint. Now, while this napkin is perfectly lovely, you can use any napkin. Follow the steps. Use the modeling paste. Overpaint the focal image. Bring out the texture. The steps stay the same even if your focal image changes. So there it is. You can see some of the gold splatter, and I'm putting it back in my easel. Love how that black just ties it all together. I'll be so happy with this. I do give this a coat, 2 coats of polyacrylic Minwax satin finish. There's the white napkin with the yellow background, and then with the yellow background. And here are some close-ups of the finished project. Thank you so much for joining me. As I said, I hope you give something from here a try. Until next time, go get creative.